Hello friends, today we are going to talk about something very interesting and exciting. Today with no borders practically for businesses, with multinationals, transnationals, global businesses, with the need for speed, lot of action on all fronts, with Indian companies going global, what are we going to be talking about? We are going to be talking about what is known as global management best practices. Why global? Because as we said, we are getting boundaryless, at least on the economic and the business fronts. We are surely not boundaryless on political fronts. And therefore, it becomes critical to have similar high standards of delivery of processes and products. And not only similar, but also fairly homogeneous. So what a product looks like, let's say in the US or Africa, should look the same in India and vice versa. You cannot be taking an iPad or any of those products and say they all look different, or they perform differently, or they have different features in different countries. It's surely not going to work. What this implies is we need to have similar products and processes, and they can only happen if we have a similar way of functioning. How will that similar way of functioning happen? If we have migration of what is known as best practices between organizations, between departments of organizations, between vendors and principal companies, and between one country and another. And therefore, even though this looks very high-flying or a very high-flying concept, global management best practices, it is actually going to become a necessity as we keep going along. In fact, it already has. If you're talking about car manufacturer, their vendors are local or the original equipment manufacturers. They cannot just produce whatever they think they are able to produce. They have to adhere to standards which are set in the home country and only then supply those products. So that's how critical it has become. How will they be able to supply those products? So there's going to be some technology transfer, some process transfer. What is that? That is sharing of global management best practices by default. So let us look at this very interesting topic which is there, and surprisingly, or maybe not so surprisingly, it is becoming a huge career opportunity. So anyone aspiring to get into the consultancy field or the ITES in the BPO segment, these people are highly valued and of course very well paid with a lot of global exposure. So let's move on. What are best practices? We've heard the term very often in newspapers, from professors, from teachers, from experts, from commentators. Best practices. We have to adhere to best practices. What does it mean? Simply stated, it's just a continuous better way of doing things. So if someone is doing a set of activities better than you are, you try and emulate that person. It's not copy, it's emulate. There are times when you also need to copy if there are no copyright issues involved. And if you know for a fact that working in a certain fashion is going to improve the quality of your product, obviously you have to do it. So this is a better way of doing things. This is someone has experimented with. So you don't need to reinvent the wheel. Why would you try and work out a whole process all over again or redesign a product all over again if someone has already done it? Simple example, touchpads have become very popular. Now they could have been originated probably by an Apple or maybe someone before them. Today there are so many homegrown companies who offer good quality, similar quality touchpads at maybe a fraction of the cost. Maybe with lesser features, but suddenly they've made the entire media accessible to even common people. Some of those touchpads are retailing at 7,000 and 8,000 rupees versus an iPad and a Samsung and all of those which go up to as high as 35 to 40,000 rupees. So just imagine what has this best practices kind of concept done to us in our lives. This is one simple example of what it can do to you. Of course, and why best practices? It is something which leads to a lot of productivity improvement and saving time and saving cost. Eventually, all of leads to the bottom line. So if it's a good product you design, you can charge more money. If you've saved time and cost and effort, you've saved a lot of your important and valuable money resources. So everything contributes to profitability, and therefore best practices become critical. Why best practices? As we mentioned, We are getting more and more homogeneous from a global platform. So what is seen here has to be seen or shown in a similar fashion in another country as well. You cannot say you're differentiating in your service delivery or service quality between a country A to a country B or a product A to a product B. Even within the same organization, you cannot have one product which is of a higher quality and one of a lower quality. Now that's absolute disaster because a company is known by the products and services it gives. And therefore, it's also important for your image. So that's the other factor. As we said, that reinventing the wheel is another critical aspect which you do not want to get into because reinventing cost, time, money, labor, effort, and eventually a lot of cost. Why best practices? Some more reasons why best practices. The whole world becomes your resource. You have access to global resources, or rather the best of global resources. If you are interacting with certain international organizations or come in touch with certain international bodies, you don't have to depend and struggle with the 2 or 3 people you are able to hire from your money. You can look at what is working the best globally and pick it up. All you would probably then need to do that kind of activity is just hire a consultant from there and do it at a fraction of the cost than you would have been able to do it. Now this is one big advantage. So suddenly instead of saying that I have got 4 specialists who could be actual people on your role, you suddenly say I have 50 specialists. All people working in this field globally become your specialist. You just have to look around and try and tap the best products, services and processes and try and ingrain or implement in your organization. So this is one big advantage. What it also does is you start getting aligned to similar industries globally. So if you are looking at any kind of growth prospects, you also start getting not just a global tinge but a global quality level. So it becomes that much more easier to function and acceptability goes up. If you are using certain kind of quality tools which are used by countries in like Japan or China or US and you go to a customer, assuming you are an exporter, you are going to have much more acceptability than saying I have some small factory which is running somewhere and I am doing something. So therefore this also adds to your overall brand image. So what are some of the areas in which you could have migration of global best practices or you could look at global best practices? This is pretty much in all areas. It could be human resources, it could be production, quality management, finance, sales, legal, medical professions. Surprisingly, even in creativity now, you are having this trend which is happening of something which happens globally becomes a process and people start implementing it in a similar fashion. So we will also talk towards the end of this session a little bit on standardization of creativity through a global migration process. Now there is a slight difference between adoption of a best practice and plagiarism. What is plagiarism? Plagiarism is nothing but stealing. Something which is copyrighted, patented, something unique to you, which you have taken away without acknowledging it or without paying for it, is plagiarism. Now the dividing line is very fine between adoption and plagiarism. So whenever you are trying to take over certain process or implement certain process or delivery standards, or if you are trying to take some product features, you have to be very, very sure you are not going to run into trouble with IPR issues. IPR is intellectual property right issues. Though these are not too critical in India as of now, but they have a huge impact globally. So if you try and pick up some features which are there in a US product, well, you could start off a trade war between two countries. And of course, you could be dragged into lengthy legal suits with a lot of expense and cost. So please be sure before you do anything that this is checked thoroughly. How did this advent or concept came about of best practices? Forget global best practices, of best practice migration. It typically started with production or manufacturing on a large scale. To give an example, the Ford model or the T Ford model by Henry Ford was the first automotive or the vehicle which was produced on a mass scale. So that is mass production of cars came into being at that point of time. So obviously when you're talking about mass production, you also have to talk about a standardized process, because each car has to be made in the same way within a similar time frame with similar tools and the same materials. So suddenly you spoke about standardization. But before standardization came best practices. So if you had two Ford motor plants, two of them could not operate separately or in isolation. One could not say, I would use a thinner gauge metal to make my car body, whereas someone else is using a thicker gauge metal. And therefore, the thicker gauge metal, if they found was better, then a team would go to the other factory and say, use this metal, it is better. So best practice sharing started happening. Then it started happening across states, started happening across countries also. And that is how it spreads. That is how the advent of best practice sharing has happened. It is primarily linked to production activities. The other big reason of this is the internet. Because today we all have access to so much of information thanks to the internet. We know what is going on across the world, what are the kind of products, services, standards. It becomes very important for you also to be adhering to some of those. If you are a very, very technology driven person, and if you, let's say, want to buy a cell phone, today the buzzword is Android. So if your cell phone is all the attractive features, but it is not running on, let's say, an Android 2.1 operating system, there's every chance that its sales will be less. So what do? You look at phones abroad and see that all phones with an Android 2.1 are probably selling much more. So you try and get a consultant from there who can say, how can I incorporate this operating system on my handphones or cell phones? So there you go. That was a best practice sharing which happened, right? So these are small things which happen but have a large impact. And the other one is the need for speed. Today you could be brilliant, you could have hired the best of talent in your organization. You know for a fact that you are technologically sound. But speed is the name of the game. If you want to deliver fast and better in the marketplace, you cannot afford to spend a lot of time on tedious research, surveys, analysis. And therefore you say, okay, what is working the best in organization A, B, C, or another industry or another country? Can I migrate this quickly? Even though I know I can do it, but I know I will take 1 year. But if it's already there and I implement it, it's going to take 2 months. I'd rather take something and implement it in 2 months. So this requirement for speed in everything that you do, especially on delivery of products and services, also makes it mandatory to look at best practice sharing. So next what we talk about is, what are some of the well-known best practices? It's good to say best practices, but let us get a little bit deeper into which are some of the best practices which have made it really big. They've made it become global. They become fairly standardized now as a way of functioning and adopted by multiple organizations, large and small, across spectrums and across industries. As we said, most of these started with production and are linked with production. We will also talk about certain other initiatives which are applicable for services as well, for agriculture and for various other kind of businesses. So some key practices are highlighted over here. One of the earliest and most important one is Kaizen. We've all heard about Kaizen. It's a Japanese concept. As we all know, the Japanese were, you can say, were the people who sophisticated or made great strides in production processes, especially related to technical products and services. Whether you talk about chips, automotives, high-end electronics, space technology, the Japanese are at the forefront. And all this, there are historical reasons for Japan coming up in this fashion. As we know that there was a world war, there are some traditional reasons. They are a very intelligent and proud race. Also geographic reasons. They are pretty much isolated and in a very small land area. So they have to come out with the most out of the least. So they are constantly innovating. And as a result, they've probably come out with not only some of the best and most innovative products, but also some of the best good practices. One of them is Kaizen, or also known as continuous improvement. So Kaizen means improvement or continuous improvement. It is a method where we evaluate key parameters in every aspect of the business process, which could be in the service delivery, the production, or any other aspect, and try to constantly improve it. And how do you improve it? First, you measure, you talk about it, you brainstorm, you come up with solutions, you run a pilot project, you implement the solutions, you see the benefit, and then you go the whole hog. After that, you again do the whole process again. As we said, it is continuous improvement. It is not a one-time activity. Now, how continuous is it? How structured is it? How regular it is decided by the industry, by the requirements, by certain management regulations which could be put in place for this kind of an activity. But needless to say, Kaizen was something which has spread all over the world and is used in some fashion or the other today. A lot of times it is used where people even don't know that it's actually Kaizen they are using. So you can imagine how ingrained it has become. The other most important and popular one is Six Sigma. It is becoming a buzzword. It was there with certain large organizations only till now, but now there are a lot of mid-sized companies who are trying to get into it and maybe experiment with it. So Six Sigma was initiated by Motorola in 1984. It was picked up very quickly by GE, who took it to a very different level. And in fact, Six Sigma has got popularized thanks to GE. In fact, a lot of people think that it was initiated by GE, but actually it was brought into place by Motorola. It is again one of a constant improvement methodologies which keeps on redesigning your products and processes to a level which is accepted or desired by customers, not just accepted. So here it is a backward process where we say what is it that the customer needs, work backward and redesign all your products and processes to fit the customer need. In all other methodologies, we work on a process thinking this is what is needed and this is how it will improve. Not so in Six Sigma. So that is one big difference between Six Sigma and all other methodologies. This spread globally very gradually, and one of the key aspects of Six Sigma, it talks about reduction of defects. There is no such thing as 100% elimination, but there is surely a significant reduction of defects. Now, how do we measure defects, or what could be the benchmark? So that is again something which has come in through Six Sigma. What it means is that when your organization reaches a Six Sigma level, or a particular process or a product reaches a Six Sigma level, we are saying that that product or process is 99.99967% defects free, which is as close to 100% as you can get in a normal scenario. Now this itself is a huge achievement, because most great organizations also run between 3 to 5 sigma on a normal course. So to reach a Six Sigma level and maintain it is extremely difficult. Why is it difficult? Because as I said, it's not one time. It is based on customer requirements, and as we all know, customer requirements keep changing. So you could have a product which is Six Sigma today with the same product with no change. If you evaluate it tomorrow or 2 years down the line, it will not be Six Sigma because the customer preferences have changed. So this again is a very ongoing process which we are talking about. The other two advantages of Six Sigma, it is applicable to all industries, including the tertiary sector, which is services, to agriculture. It also works very well for launch of new products and services. Whereas certain other techniques like Kaizen, etc. are more production linked, Six Sigma is applicable for services as well. And that is one big plus point about this particular initiative which has happened. Again, it has spread pretty much throughout the world with a lot of great benefits for a lot of organizations. And by benefits, we mean concrete, hardcore, monetary benefits, and not just some notional or theoretical stuff we are talking about. Let's come to some other concepts. One is the 5 S's, again a Japanese concept. where you talk about sorting of materials, where constantly you're looking out for what you need. Now, if you've sorted them well and thrown out what is not required, these could also be papers on your desk, for example, it becomes much easier for you every time to refer to or take those implements which are required. Saves time. If it saves time, obviously it's going to save you a lot of cost, especially when you're talking about a production line. Next is categorizing or setting it up in order. What it means is you've sorted everything, and what is required again you categorize. So certain kind of tools you require first, so you keep them right ahead. The next set of tools you require next in the production line, so you keep them a little after that. So someone does not have to think and waste time, and in the bargain waste a precious production line time. What it means from a production point of view, you could manufacture probably 10 more TVs or 10% more TVs every hour, which probably means a 5 to 8% more revenue, which is phenomenal if you're talking about a large turnover company. So a small concept like this, you can imagine how much of gain does it lead to. Next is cleanliness. We all know that cleanliness on the floor, on the workplace, contributes monetarily as well. Anything that is unclean can lead to accidents, damages, fire, slippages, wastages, and so on and so forth. So you keep your work surroundings very, very clean. Next is we are talking about standardizing. So after we've thrown away what is not required, we've categorized everything, we're keeping everything clean, now we standardize. So if in a similar place we have similar kind of requirements, we standardize. For example, on a particular office floor, if we have only a lot of legal secretaries sitting who need a lot of that typical legal green paper, standardization would mean on that floor you would only deliver those legal green papers and only have certain kind of copier machine, so that it becomes standardized for the entire legal department. Otherwise, someone will be using white paper, green paper, different sizes, different types of photocopiers. Now, if you do that and have to file a legal petition, it gets rejected for a simple thing. So, standardization works. And the next one is, to manage all this, obviously you cannot have a policeman all the time on you. So, we talk about self-discipline. We've understood and realized that this is what is required. So, do it. You don't need someone on your head to monitor it all the time. So, this is what is known as 5 S's. To this, people have added 2 more S's, 3 more S's. Someone says 6 S's, 7 S's, 8 S's. Now it's even going up to 9 S's. But this is the crux of the whole thing. This is the heart of the matter on what you are supposed to be doing. Another Japanese concept is quality circles. The Japanese were probably some of the first persons globally to involve shop floor workers in management decisions. This is what quality circle is about. Quality word signifies itself how to continuously improve quality. Circle means a set of people who get together on a regular basis, have a structured meeting, most of whom could be shop floor workers, managers, foremen, and see how you could keep improving your products and processes, or how could you take care of certain problems which may have occurred in the past. So that is known as a quality circle. Now all of these concepts are either used in isolation or as part of a bigger quality management framework or a production framework. But as you've seen, most of these good concepts have come from Japan. They have been shared as best practices, they have migrated globally, and have been used effectively by a lot of organizations across the board. Another concept is project management program. There are certain industries like consultancy, like manufacturing, but on a contract basis, like construction, where a building is a project. Once it's made and sold, the project is over. Now, there is a slightly different approach which is required for managing projects. For example, setting up a power plant is a project. Running it becomes a business, but the setup activity is a project. So how do you handle that project from inception to delivery is what this talks about. And there are certain well laid out methodologies, processes and steps which are to be followed. So now we have something known as PMP, which is very widely used in the IT and ITES sectors in a big way. There is also an international body who monitors and trains people on PMP. This is another best practice which typically started in the US and now is spreading all over, especially in project-based companies or project-based job roles. Another concept you all may have heard about is JIT or just in time. Of course, there are many other newer concepts which have come in beyond JIT or just in time, but this is to bring to the fore that there was a time when production costs were killing, or not killing, but severely impacting the profitability of a lot of organizations. So they decided that how can I get a product delivered to the customer when he wants it, in the form he wants it, without maintaining too much of inventory at my end. So that was the whole concept of JIT. Again, it has become fairly standardized. Now no one talks about JIT. It is assumed today that you have to reduce production cost, you have to have minimal inventory and deliver the product the way the customer requires it. So in that sense, it has become part of a regular process now. But if you talk about the 80s, etc., it was a very, very big buzzword. Human resource related. Why do we talk about best practices in human resource management? Ironically, or not so ironically, as and when automation increases, technology increases, human resources are actually becoming much more important and not less important. Because they are the ones who are driving this technology. They are the ones who have to manage and monitor. With so much of technology and internet, aspirations have gone up. People are no longer satisfied with small things. People are no longer satisfied with slow growth also at an individual level. So it becomes very important to manage your human resources in a very, very nice, structured, organized way. So there are a lot of things which are there in human resources which could be done. So challenges are obtaining and retaining the right kind of persons for a particular job role. Managing aspirations. You get in the right people, but you're not able to manage their aspirations. Today, people want to reach levels of management within 4 to 5 years of working. Now that is not possible. So what do? You'll have huge attrition at that particular stage. How do you retain those people? How do you give them more challenges in the workplace? How do you reward them better? In what fashion will you reward them? So all this is getting more and more structured, and there is a lot of best practice sharing which has started happening, and a lot of similar processes which are taking place globally. So what are some of the things which have started happening? Quarterly performance appraisals instead of an annual appraisal which is there. Target linked appraisals. This is something fairly new, but rather than doing an annual subjective appraisal where your boss says whether you are good or not, you say, were your monthly or quarterly targets met? If you have, you are good for that month or that quarter, take your money and your rewards, move on to the next quarter. So this is slowly coming into the picture. We are talking about 360-degree evaluations. Now this is something which is actually a best practices. Some of the organizations are using it globally, but there is a lot of resistance to it. Now we'll talk about it maybe in some other talk on 360-degree evaluations, but this is a very fantastic concept, yet to make any inroads into India at all. So I'm sure, however, in the times to come, this HR practice will also come into the country in a fairly large way. Learning and development. There are a lot of structured processes coming in place of identifying and delivering training and development plans and job rotations, etc. Now let us talk about service delivery as a concept. The service delivery itself as a concept is fairly recent and itself has started become a best practice which has started moving globally and slowly going across borders. So what is service delivery? It is not customer service at all. And that is the biggest mistake which people make. Service delivery itself means delivering a product or service the way a customer wants it, end to end, which probably means that you have to go all the way back to the drawing board and then deliver. Now that is the issue over here. So the entire process has to be redesigned from the beginning, if required, or even probably a product. Service delivery is not customer service. To give an idea or a differentiation between customer service and service delivery, you have made a product which you think will sell. It goes in the marketplace. There is some defect in the product. Let's say it is a TV which is not working properly, and someone calls in. You repair the TV. Now that is customer service. But service delivery means that I have designed a TV the way the customers want it. It is delivered at doorstep. It has self-curing maybe or self-repair setup inside the TV, which happens on its own. So now that becomes service delivery, where you created, designed and delivered a product in the way it is required. So it is a much bigger and broader concept than purely customer service. So in today's scenario, customer service is actually a small part of service delivery as a concept. So why do we talk about service delivery? Obviously, customers are more and more demanding. Borders have become global so far as business is concerned, and you do need products which can compete as well in the US, as well in China, as well in India, and as well in Africa or Australia or any which way, or maybe a South America. So you need service delivery as a concept coming in and not just customer service. So let's take an example of service delivery. You remember the earlier days of laptops, those huge, bulky, unwieldy things. You did not know what to do with them. Even if you took them, you opened them, there was no software. So you had to run around trying to find a CD. You didn't know whether it was licensed, it was not licensed. Then you run around to someone who could load it for you because you did not know how to load it. After loading, there would be a bug as usual. Again, you would be running around with a new laptop, which is also very bulky, and see whether it can be repaired. If the repairs happened easily, if the software got loaded nicely, you would be happy. So that was customer service. But look at what is happening now. You have a thin, sleek laptop, 10 inches or 11 inches. It is preloaded software. So as soon as you open and press the on switch, there is an operating system. There are all softwares which are loaded in it. You don't have to worry about licensing issues because all of them come with licensed preloaded softwares, whether it's a Windows or whatever it is that you've taken with that particular laptop, and you just start working on it. You don't have to go anywhere, don't do anything. It has actually become like an off-the-shelf, ready-to-use product. Now that is service delivery. It is coming in the fashion you want, the way you want, at the place you want. By place we mean you could click on the internet. It's become so standardized, I don't really need to go to a showroom to buy a laptop. I know the configuration, I know the weight, I know which company is it from, I know what are the features. I could go on the internet, click, and it gets delivered at home. And a lot of sales are now happening in this fashion. So that is the entire service delivery concept, that you're making things which are absolutely tailor-made to a customer segment. And that is very important. That's exactly how an iPad kind of a concept came into the picture, where there was a great need of some sort of convergent technology which would bridge the gap between carrying a laptop and a cell phone. Cell phone was too small to carry out a lot of functions with a very small screen. You never really could carry around a bulky laptop. So someone thought, hey, let me come with something in between. It's easy to carry, light, maybe not as fast or with as much capacity as a laptop, but much more than a cell phone. So suddenly the regular business traveler finds a lot of value in buying something like a pad or a touch pad. So that's a concept of service delivery. So an entire new product category has come out of this. Okay, so this is what it's all about. Also what it does is, most of the electronic products today are easy to use. There are a lot of self-help manuals, a lot of things on the internet which you could go through, softwares you could download. So now you don't really need too many technicians or going back to the company or to a workshop or to wherever to either fix your product or to upgrade your product. And that's very important. And if all else fails, it's only then that you call up a customer service department who will try and fix a problem. So now you see in this whole service delivery chain, where is customer service department as a department? It's probably just 1/10 and probably as a last resort. Beyond that or before that, you typically don't have anything known as customer service. It is about how to give exceptional service delivery. Finance. Surprisingly, there's also a lot of global best practice sharing in finance. Some of it by default, some of it through regulation or international treaties, but it has come in. We talk about international accounting standards, IAS, getting adopted. We have started hearing about a lot of companies also adopting the US GAAP or US generally accepted accounting principles. As we said, we are multinational. A lot of Indian companies are going global. They want to know their results based on their own systems, which is US GAAP. So again, there's some practice sharing or best practice sharing which is happening. Standardization in treasury is also happening. That if you want to park your money for a short term somewhere, there are certain kinds of products or money linked products where you put your money. You no longer go and say, okay, oh, I'll do an FD for so much and I will maybe trade on equities for so much and so on. So this is also becoming fairly standardized. This is another example of a best practice sharing by default, which is happening. Adoption of certain norms like Basel, which we all know of, or at least heard of if we don't know of. Even regulatory authorities like IRDA and TRAI came into being because something like this was existing abroad. So when we were opening out our sectors in insurance and telecom, that is how these governing bodies have come into the picture. And all these governing bodies interact with each other at a global level to share what is happening in each country. So now this is a very formalized government level best practice sharing which is happening. It's interesting, isn't it? Creativity. I spoke earlier about creativity, and what is the concept of best practice sharing in creativity? I mean, it's just something that comes off your head, right? Well, probably, but there is a way to channelize what just comes off your head. So now you have sessions which are conducted on creativity, and there is a process for that. So we have all heard of 6 thinking hats by Edward de Bono. Now it is a structured methodology of harnessing creativity. That's what it is. With certain steps which are A, B, C, D, and this is how you make a group. This is how you'll have a moderator. This is how you'll have a facilitator. You will have these kind of things being discussed in this kind of a situation. So now we are talking about harnessing or structuring a creative process. So that's what started typically in the US or Europe, and now if you see brainstorming sessions everywhere are typically held in a very similar fashion. So again, it's a global best practice in that sense. Well, now you would be confused, I'm sure. Why confusion? There are so many things happening in each area, in each industry. What to adopt? How to adopt? Will it be suited for me? What is the cost implication? Will my employees accept? Will my customers or vendors be able to accept it? What will actually happen? After I do everything, will it actually give me the desired output? If I'm not going to have any benefit or any tangible cost benefit, why would I want to do it? And do I know upfront whether this will have a benefit or not? Now, these are some of the questions which obviously would be going through everyone's mind when you talk about adopting any kind of practice, even though it's tried and tested. Now, to counter these questions, there is another set of questions you need to ask and answer yourself. What is the organization culture? Do we have young people who are open to change, or is it a very set and stable organization going on for long? Now, these organizations, it's going to take a long time to try and institute something new. Do we have a stable trained workforce? A solid trained workforce can manage these transitions much better. Do we have monitoring mechanisms? Do we have strong HR processes? Do we have a buy-in from all our stakeholders and shareholders? Obviously, very important to go back to them and say, I'm doing something new. It could impact your bottom line positively, but maybe there is a 1% chance it may not work. There is also a cost implication involved, so we need to look at that. Are we doing it because it's a fad? Oh, I've heard about Six Sigma. Let me do Six Sigma in my organization. Is that why you're doing it? Everyone is ISO. Let me also try and be ISO compliant. Are you at a stage where you require it? Because there is again a cost and time implication. Are we also doing it because we are forced by our overseas partners? Yes, sometimes it happens. If you want to get into contract with certain organizations or you become an outsourcing partner, they will insist that certain processes and methods are in a certain prescribed fashion. So these are all the questions that you need to ask yourself. So how do we evaluate and implement? So after you ask these series of questions, hire a consultant. That's one of the things which a lot of organizations have started doing for best practice sharing. Once you decide on certain initiatives to be migrated and you, let's say, hired a consultant or you plan to do it in-house, you have to ensure it becomes a success. It's not easy even for the best of practices to succeed because there is always going to be a huge organizational resistance to anything that you try to do. So firstly, create a very strong buzz. Just spread the news. Something great is going to happen in the organization. Make a big hoo-ha, make a big plan. Let there be teasers. Let there be a lot of mails going out. Let there be a lot of excitement being generated around it so that people know. Publicize it very, very heavily, constantly and continuously till it becomes ingrained. That is going to slowly start getting acceptability. Also, work out a rewards and recognition program. So all the initiatives or an initiative you want to do and want to implement, all the people who participate and excel, work out some kind of rewards and recognition. So more and more people get enthused about it and try to participate in it. Else, it is likely that it will become a failure. You need to have strong monitoring mechanisms to know that what you are implementing, is it working and to what extent. If you are not monitoring or measuring what you are doing, obviously you'll never know how it's working. Most important is top management. This is top management has to drive this. Forget the buy-in. They have to drive this. Just imagine if you went and if your boss is not enthusiastic about something, would you ever do it? No, you would figure out on your own that he talks about it, but okay, he's not too keen. So slowly it will fizzle out. So you have to ensure that the top management, assuming some of you would be in top management and will be there soon, need to drive this in that fashion. And once all this is happening, start broadcasting results in a formal way. All the good results. We implemented this. This was the cost saved. We added $1 million to our balance sheet. We did this. This happened because of this particular best practice. These kind of broadcast messages need to continuously happen. And once all of this is being done or done over a period of time, slowly it will become part of the organization and its culture itself. And that is how a best practice gets migrated. It is very, very difficult, but the rewards are also very, very great. So, be the best and thank you.